We're talking about stories that Jesus told, and this is the third part of a four-part series where Jesus talked about when he was sowing seed. He told a story about a guy who was sowing seed, and the seed landed on various kinds of ground. First week we said it could land on hard pack, but if that happens, nothing happens with the seed, and the birds come and get it. Last week we talked about throwing your seed into rocky soil and it'll come up, but it doesn't last very long in the sun because it doesn't have deep roots. This week we're going to talk about how the sower sowed his seeds and it ended up in the thorns. Now, we don't have any thorns in our yard, but we do have ground cover, and it's kind of the same thing. So if the seed ends up in among the ground cover, it might come up a little bit, but the ground cover will overtake it, use up all the soil, and eventually it'll die. And the problem here is there's too much competition. Jesus, when he was telling the story, he was talking about the fact that if the Word of God comes to us and we have too much competition for the Word of God, things like our worries, or greed, a desire for money, that those things can sort of crowd out the Word of God in our lives and end up doesn't grow. It just gets crowded out. We don't want that to happen. We want to be committed to the Word of God. We don't want to let false gods or anxiety or worry. Right now, anxiety and worry is pretty tough for us, but worry and anxiety can crowd out Jesus out of our lives, and we certainly don't want things like greed to crowd Jesus out as well. So that's our talk for today. Next week we're going to talk about what happens when the seed gets sown on really good soil.